नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवतसेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिके Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Chapter 6, Prescribed Duties for Mankind. Chapter 16, King Chitraketu meets the Lord. Text number 23. Yanna sprishanti na vidur yanna sprishanti na vidur yanna sprishanti na vidur manobuddhi indriya asavaha manobuddhi indriya asavaha
Within, Bahi, outside,
also Vikatam expanded Yomavat like the sky, that unto him Nataha bow, Asmi and Aham I. Translation by His Divine Presence Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The Supreme Brahman emanates from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and expands like the sky. Although untouched by anything material, it exists within and without. Nonetheless, the mind, intelligence, senses, and living force can neither touch him nor know him. I offer unto him my respectful obeisances. Please repeat the translation. The Supreme Brahman emanates from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and expands like the sky. Although untouched by anything material, it exists within and without. Nonetheless, the mind, intelligence, senses, and living force can neither touch him nor know him. I offer unto him my respectful obeisances. Text 24. Dehendriya pranamanoyomi yad amsha viddha pracharanti karmasu naivanyadaloham iva prataptam sthaneshu tantra prapadesham eti. Translation. As iron has the power to burn when made red hot in the association of fire, so the body, senses, living force, mind and intelligence, although merely lumps of matter, can function in their activities when infused with a particle of consciousness by the Supreme Personality of God. As iron cannot burn unless heated by fire, the bodily senses cannot act unless favored by the Supreme Brahman. Purport. Red hot iron can burn, but it cannot burn the original fire. Therefore, the consciousness of the small particle Brahman is fully dependent on the power of the Supreme Brahman. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Mantas Smritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha. From me, the conditioned soul receives memory, knowledge, and forgetfulness. The power for activities comes from the Supreme Lord. And when the Lord withdraws the power, the conditioned soul no longer has energy with which to act through his various senses. The body includes 5 knowledge-acquiring senses, 5 active senses, and the mind. But actually, these are merely lumps of matter. For example, the brain is nothing but matter. But when electrified by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the brain can act. Just as iron can burn when made red hot by the influence of fire. The brain can act while we are awake or even while we are dreaming. But when we are fast asleep or unconscious, the brain is inactive. Since the brain is a lump of matter, it does not have independent power with which to act. It can act only when favored by the influence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is Brahman or Parabrahman. This is the way to understand how the Supreme Brahman Krishna is present everywhere, just as the sunshine is present because of the sun god in the sun globe. The Supreme Lord is called Rishikesha. He is the only conductor of the senses. Unless empowered by his energy, our senses cannot act. In other words, he is the only seer, the only worker, the only listener, and the only active principle or supreme controller. Thus ends Srimad Bhagavatam Prabhu. Om Jnana-Timirandasya Jnana-Vinishalakaya Chakshurum-Militam Jena Tasmai Shri-Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu-Padaya Krishna-Prishthaya Bhutale Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So these are prayers which are being taught by Narada to King Chitraketu. Narada Muni instructed Chitraketu in the transcendental knowledge after he gave him realization by making his dead son speak. So Chitraketu was able to completely cut off his attachment for his family, and he was able to hear from Narada Muni the instructions regarding offering prayers to the Supreme Lord and thereby re-establishing the lost contact with the Lord. Throughout the Bhagavatam, this is the theme, that we are all connected with the Supreme Lord originally, but now we have lost that connection temporarily, and we have revived that connection through the appropriate method. And Bhagavatam recommends the method of bhakti over every other method. Now, in offering prayers to the Supreme Lord, some very important truths about what is happening in this world is brought out. In ignorance, we think that we are independent. Why do we think we are independent? Because we have got this amazing body. The body is made up of senses. And the senses are instruments for seeing, touching, smelling, or doing so many activities. So the senses are working very wonderfully, actually, even though they are actually lumps of dead matter. For that matter, the fact is the body, which is made up of senses, the mind, the intelligence, all are actually dead matter. They don't have, even the living force is described here as dead matter. Body, senses, living force, mind and intelligence merely are lumps of matter. Just like this table. The table you can understand is dead matter. But can you consider the senses or the mind or the intelligence as dead matter? We'll never consider that as dead matter. We think they're all living, or we consider them as part of living person. But the reality is these are all dead matter. Then how is it that they are working so wonderfully? They are working because they have been infused with a particle of consciousness by the Supreme Lord. What has the Supreme Lord done? He has placed one soul here inside this body. When we acquire this body, who injects the consciousness or the particle of consciousness, the soul inside the body, which is the Supreme Lord. In the beginning of creation, He injects by His glance. And later on, the same particle of consciousness, the soul, changes bodies under the supervision. Karmana Daiva Netrena. Daiva Netra means the superintendence or the direction of the super soul. Paramatma. The same Vishnu who first injects the living entity into material nature. The same Vishnu is present as super soul to guide the living entity to change bodies. Give up one body and accept another body. At that time, through some arrangement, again the living entity is particle of consciousness, soul is injected into one body, another body, another body, another body, another body. All these bodies are lumps of matter. Even the subtle body also, mind, intelligence, living force also. The living force is appearing to be like living, the very word, living force. Living force. Prana. Prana, living force. This living force appears to be, that is described here as asavaha. Life as prana, the living force. It appears to be living, actually it is not living. It is activated by the particle of consciousness injected into this body by the Supreme Lord. And for everything to work, it is said here that the bodily senses cannot act unless favored by the Supreme Brahman. Now, as consciousness, as soul, as living entity, I am sitting inside this body, but I cannot see with these eyes until the Supreme Lord sees. I cannot touch with these hands until the Supreme Lord touches. Why? Because even though I am seated in this body, my consciousness is simply Kshetrajna, aware of the field, aware of the body, is conscious of the body. The actual movement, working of the body is made possible by the arrangement of the Supreme Lord. It's an arrangement of the Supreme Lord. He makes this arrangement. His presence inside this body makes this body active. His presence makes this body active. And then, while the body is working, because of the body being energized by the arrangement of the Supreme Lord, then I foolishly think that I am the body or this body is mine. I am the controller. Actually, I am not the body, I am not the controller of this body. I am simply conscious of this body. That also, when the Supreme Lord gives me that awareness. How does he give me awareness? Matta smriti jnanam apohanam cha sarvasya chaham buddhi sandivishto matta smriti jnanam apohanam cha. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the 10th chapter, where is the Bhagavad Gita? You don't have a book. Bhagavad Gita, there is a verse. Krishna says in the 10th chapter, I am the Chetana in every living entity. Which is the verse? Find out the verse. Krishna is the Chetana, the consciousness in every living entity. So actually inside this body, there is two consciousness. One is my own consciousness, which is simply aware. Which is aware. Oh, this is a book, this is a table. Or this is my hand, this awareness. And then there is one more consciousness which is working for actually energizing all the parts of the body. The heart is beating, the eyes are seeing, the ears are hearing, the mind is working, the intelligence is working, the life air is circulating, prana. All this is because of the Chetana of the Supreme Lord. This is the verse?
22nd verse.
22nd verse. Read the verse. Saumya.
Vedanam samvedosmi devanam asmi vasava indriyanam manaschasmi bhutanam asmi chetana.
Bhutanam asmi chetana. This is what Krishna says in the 10th chapter. Okay, read the translation.
Of the Vedas, I am the Samaveda. Of the demigods, I am Indra. Of the senses, I am the mind. And in the living beings, I am the living force, knowledge.
Knowledge. In the living beings, I am the living force, and this living force is explained proper as knowledge. Read the purport.
The difference between matter and spirit is that matter has no consciousness like the living entity. Therefore, this consciousness is supreme and eternal. Consciousness cannot be produced by a combination of matter.
Consciousness cannot be produced by combination of matter. Consciousness is supreme and eternal. This consciousness that is actually there in this body, two consciousness we have to recognize. The consciousness of myself, I, the real knower, one knower of the body, who is just aware, who is just witnessing what is happening. And another consciousness who is actually activating everything, that is the Supreme Lord Paramatma. He is making everything happen. He is actually making the life air circulate. He is energizing the senses. He is energizing the mind. He is energizing the intelligence. He is making the heart pump blood. He is doing everything in this body. He explains that in detail in the 15th chapter. Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Dehamarshata Pranapana Samayukta Pachamyantam Chaturvidam. I become I am the fire of digestion in every living being. 15th chapter, Krishna explains. I am the fire of digestion. So if you examine the Bhagavad Gita, where all Krishna says what all he is, that is actually the consciousness of the Supreme Lord, not our consciousness. Our consciousness is simply witness. After the eyes are energized and something happens, right? I say, I am seeing. Actually, I am not seeing. The Lord is seeing and He is given me knowledge of what is seen, and then I am thinking I am seeing. That's called Bhutanam Asmi Chetana. The Lord is seeing, the Lord is hearing whatever sound, and then He is giving me knowledge. This is what is heard. Very nicely, Prabhupada explains here, the brain is nothing but matter, but when electrified by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, when the brain is electrified by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the brain can act. Brain can work only when electrified by the energy of the Supreme Personality. Now here, Prabhupada is saying the brain can act while we are awake or even when we are dreaming. But when we are unconscious, the brain is inactive. Our own consciousness, 3 states. What are the 3 states of consciousness? Jagrata Avastha, when we are awake, then Swapna Avastha, dreaming state of our consciousness. When we are awake, we are conscious or we are aware of so many things happening outside. These senses, through the mind, through the intelligence, whatever is happening externally. Then when we are in Swapna Avastha, we are aware of one dream. We are conscious of something called dream that's happening internally. Then there is the unconscious state, also called deep sleep or sushupti in Sanskrit. Sushupti. You are unconscious. You are neither aware of the dream world nor you are aware of the external world. So what happens in the sushupti or deep sleep or unconscious state? Your brain is not working. Your senses are not working. Your intelligence is not working. Your mind is not working. None of them are working. So that is because the Lord, who is the controller, who is present in the heart, He has put you into that unconscious state. It is He who actually puts you in different states of consciousness. So that Supreme Lord actually, by His energy, He is making all this work. It is His energy. His energy that is making all this work. That energy is different from our awareness. It is not the same as our awareness. Because we are inside this body, even when we are in the unconscious state. Why cannot we be conscious in the unconscious state? Why do we become unconscious? We are there in the body. If our consciousness were to be energizing this body, then our senses could work when we are in the body. But we become unconscious, which means that it is not our consciousness which is activating this body. If it is our consciousness, at least as long as I am present in this body, I will always be conscious. Why do I become unconscious even when I am in this body? That I am in this body in the unconscious state, you can understand, because the heart is beating. Correct? Heart is functioning. The body is working. But I am not aware. How is it I am not aware? When I am in this body is working. I become unconscious. So somebody makes me I lose my consciousness, awareness, not consciousness, I lose my awareness when I go into an unconscious state. So somebody is making it happen now. Somebody is controlling. Who is that controller? That is the Supreme Lord. And how is He controlling? By His energy. By His energy He is controlling. That is explained here. Unless empowered by His energy, our senses cannot act. Our senses cannot work. Unless empowered by His energy. So that energy of the Supreme Lord is explained in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita as Bhutanam Asmi Chetana. Bhutanam Asmi Chetana. So the Lord's presence is what we have to become conscious of. This is called Krishna consciousness. If you become Krishna conscious, then you go to a fourth state of existence or consciousness called Turiyavastha. Krishna consciousness. Then you never lose consciousness, awareness. You never lose awareness. Then it doesn't matter whether you are awake or you are asleep. Just like Prabhupada. Whether he is sleeping or he is awake, all the time he is Krishna conscious. He is always Krishna conscious. So, therefore we say his body is acting spiritually. Therefore we say his thinking is spiritual. His intelligence works spiritually. His activities are all spiritual. His words are all spiritual. Why? Because he is Krishna conscious. Actually, he is not going through wakeful state, sleeping state, dreaming state, unconscious state. He is not going through these four states, these three states that we are all going through. He is Krishna conscious all the time, 24 hours a day, all the time. So it is different. That's the Turiyavastha, that's the fourth stage of consciousness. Living being. So that is the state we have to achieve by practicing Krishna consciousness. By practice, you have to achieve that state. So here the prayer is that the Supreme Brahman emanates from the Supreme Personality of God and expands like the sky. The Supreme Brahman, that means this is the energy of the Supreme Lord. Supreme Lord is in the spiritual sky. But his energy expands. It comes out of him and expands. Expands in the sky means expands everywhere. Everywhere he expands. Although untouched by anything material, it exists within and without. The Supreme Brahman or the Supreme energy of the Supreme Lord is not touched by matter. Cannot be touched by matter. Completely spiritual. So that energy is everywhere, inside ourselves, outside ourselves, everywhere, inside and outside of everything material. Nonetheless, the mind, intelligence, senses and living force can neither touch him nor know him. We try to understand, perceive or grasp anything by our mind or through our intelligence or through our senses or through even the living force. Through the living force. That living force is that power to do something or to grasp something or to understand something. That living force. We try to understand, we try to grasp, we try to see or we try to hear or we try to think that living force, but none of them can actually touch the Supreme Lord nor can know Him. It's not through these methods that you can touch or know. Unto that Supreme Lord, Narada Muni is telling, I offer my respectful obeisances. You see? And he's explaining the example of iron. Now carefully understand this example, I'll close with this. Iron has the power to burn something when it is made red hot in association with fire. Iron is not fire, but iron can act like fire in association with fire. Similarly, the body, senses, living force, mind, intelligence, everything can function like senses, like active senses, like active mind, only when infused with a particle of consciousness by the Supreme Personality of God. Only when the Supreme Lord infuses energy into these things, then only they can function. So, the bodily senses cannot act without being favored by the Supreme Lord. That's the conclusion. So, with this example of iron, just like iron, when it is red hot, even though it acts like fire, it is not fire. It is not fire. Iron is not fire. Iron doesn't become fire. It acts like fire. Similarly, the senses, they work like living senses or empowered senses only when empowered by the influence of the Supreme Lord who is present in the heart. Is Paramatma. That's why it is said, as Paramatma, he enters into everything and infuses his energy or his power into anything. Even matter. See, matter is actually dead matter, but still matter we can use in so many ways. We can transform matter, we can combine matter, we can use matter in so many different ways, we can transform matter in so many ways. How is that possible? Because the Supreme Lord has infused matter with his energy. That is the energy called Brahman. That is different from matter. That is different from matter. That Brahman is different from matter. The Brahman is not matter. That energy of the Lord which is infused into matter. Because with matter has got certain potency to act. Just like you take acid and alkali, you mix, some reaction happens. Where is that energy coming from? That is the energy of the Supreme Lord called Brahman. Right? You take cement, you put some water, suddenly there is some reaction. Right? Then cement will harden, isn't it? How is that happening? Water is dead matter, cement is dead matter. How can there be reaction? How can there be some mixing? How can it happen? Only because of the Lord entering into everything and infusing His energy into all these things, that these things interact in a particular way. So that is the Brahman that is present everywhere, entered into everything. So that Brahman is actually emanating from the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the spiritual world. So that Supreme Lord, we pay our respects. So this we have to carefully understand. More will be explained in the later verses by Narada Muni in offering prayers to the Supreme Lord. Okay, stop here. Any questions? Anybody's got? Yeah. Role of material energy. See, material energy is one of the energies of the Lord. Okay? That material energy is acting. Acting how? Being infused with the energy of the Supreme Lord called Brahman. Being infused with the energy of the Supreme Lord called Brahman, material energy can act. Otherwise, material energy cannot act. Which one? As emanation of the Supreme Lord, everything is Brahman. We are also Brahman. But you have to distinguish Brahman, who is the Supreme Lord, from the Brahman, which is matter or which is this spirit soul. You have to distinguish. So that distinction is made when you consider the Lord's internal potency. That internal potency is the energy, personal energy of the Lord. That internal energy actually is energizing everything. That is the energy of the Lord. Okay. Otherwise, material energy cannot act. Living entity cannot act. This material world is made up of what? Only the living entity and the material energy, that's all. But it's the Lord who enters as Brahman into everything, into matter, into spirit, into everything, and then energizes and everything starts happening. The modes become activated, the living entity becomes conscious, aware, consciousness aware. Consciousness is always there, but you become aware, you start perceiving. Even in the spiritual world, if you have to perceive spiritual entities, how do you perceive? Being infused with the energy of the Supreme Lord. Only then you can perceive. So that is the favor of the Supreme Lord of the living entity when you take to devotional service. He infuses you with his internal potency by which you can become aware of his form, his name, his qualities, his abode, his paraphernalia, everything spiritual. Even your own self is completely spiritual. Now, how to know yourself? You are to be infused with the energy of the Supreme Lord, that energy by which you actually become aware of all that. Internal potency, yes. Internal potency. Even Krishna showed Arjuna the universal form by his internal potency, not his external potency, by his internal potency. So the Lord always acts by his internal potency, even in the material world. He does not act by his external potency. His external potency is simply for the living entities to exploit. That's why it's called separated energy. Bhumirāma vayu kamano direvaja ahankārayam vinna prakriti apareyam itastu anyam prakritim viddhime param jivabhutam mahabhavu yayedam dharyate jagat. The living entities are exploiting this matter. But the Lord is not exploiting matter or not doing anything to matter. He is infusing energy into matter so that matter gets some power which we can play around with. I am the creator, I am the destroyer, I am the maintainer. I can think like that. I can do so many things. I can exploit matter only because the Lord infuses matter with that energy, His energy. Yes, soul is witnessing and desiring. Inside the body, that's all. The soul really becomes active in the spiritual realm. Your real activity begins when you come to the spiritual platform. Because you're spirit. You're meant to act on the spiritual platform. You're not meant to act on the material platform. Material platform, all these huge arrangement is there by the Lord. It's an arrangement. The spiritual platform is factual activity. Those spiritual senses that we have, they don't require to be infused with the energy of the Lord. They directly serve the Lord under the influence of the internal potency. Under the influence of the internal potency, directly the spiritual senses will act, will see, will touch, will smell, will do everything. It's not a phenomenon there. That is what is explained in the 7th chapter. Okay, stop. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.